what you gotta do. For the children.
Heads up, the ball is in our court.
To offer themselves as instruments of healing.
The master, as a boy here.
I hope that my sermon will give you clarity about why you are here, and also some sense of the mission to which you will return when this week's high privilege has come to an end. I want to begin by explaining what inspired the message I plan to share with you. First, a passage of Scripture, and then an experience, and the message that is ours tonight. There was in the 5th chapter of John an account of a healing that Jesus provided one day. The text says that Jesus went to a place where there were a whole lot of sick people, and one of them had been ill for 38 years. And when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." And at once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. Now that day was a Sabbath. What I want to talk about is the healing of the spirit of America. That's what I want to talk about. And the reason I want to talk about it is because I keep getting the impression everywhere I go to preach that what the Spirit is doing is preparing a group of people who will become instruments of the Spirit for healing the spirit of our nation. And that is my answer to you who have wondered, why did I give up this week to go down to Haley Farm? Why have I sustained this time, giving up even my vacation to come here? The answer is you are being recruited as instruments for the healing of the spirit of our nation. Well, let's get right down to the point. What I think needs healing is, I think, familiar to all of you. For an example, we need not start with Oklahoma City bombing. There are some little things that are happening all across the nation that reveal that we are not as healthy as a nation as we ought to be. Let me begin with something little. In this July 17th issue of Jet, which is especially an information piece about advancement of particular people in the American context, there is an article here that talks about Ben Sharp. Did anybody read about Ben Sharp? What? You got to wait till you get back home to get your jet? Well, let me tell you. It says that Ben Sharp was the head of his class. He's 13 years old. That he had received the superintendent's award for being the outstanding 8th grader. But he had a 4.0 average. But when time for graduation came, they had asked him the day before graduation or sometime before it, if he would be willing to have some words to say. And Ben Sharp, wanting to look sharp, went down to the barber shop and got a haircut. And the haircut was very close because he said it was getting hot and he wanted to be cool. But the policy of the school forbade students from getting a shaved head. Well, this wasn't a shaved head. It was with the scissors and the shaving equipment. That's all. No shaving his head. What do? They forbade him to participate in the commencement and did not even mention his name. Now, it's kind of, notice I'm starting with the little stuff, the kind of mean little stuff that happens across the nation. There's a sister here from Philadelphia that I met earlier this afternoon. Where are you? Yes, there she is, my Roman Catholic sister. Let me say to you, there's a church in Philadelphia that put into the bulletin the following announcement, that if anybody here has AIDS, you are not welcome to sit in this assembly. And if you have been tested positive for HIV/AIDS, you will not be accepted into the fellowship of this church. Notice, no need to begin with Oklahoma City. I'm just talking about a little meanness here and there. And then every day for almost 2 months, when I got up to read my New York Times early in the morning, looks like every day for nearly 2 months, I thought I was observing Job's servants. You remember the story of Job, how every day his servants would come bringing bad news? The dismantling of a Head Start program, the cutting out of welfare support, aid to dependent children, no regulation for ecological soundness in our policies, one right after the other, cutting the budget on the backs of the poor. I mean, every day as the advance of the contract. And this sermon is a bipartisan sermon, so I'm going to include those Democrats and the Republicans who are somehow not able to respond positively to the needs of all children. Well, let me stop messing around with just these general light things that suggest a problem. In my city of New York, the mayor of my city had a press conference. And we do not have a record of what was said there. The tape was not running, but the word got out into the newspapers, and I see some New Yorkers smiling, that said that the idea was that if you cut out welfare benefits, or if you don't cut them out, you cut them back, and make it so tough for people who have been on dependencies that what may happen is that when in New York City the benefits weren't so good, that might encourage the poor people to go somewhere else. And the word got out that the mayor's policy was designed to run poor people out of New York City. Well, the mayor denied that, and because I was not there and there is no tape, I don't want to hang that on him. But I do get the impression that the spirit in the land, see, I'm talking about healing the spirit in the land. The spirit in the land is that not simply that dependency is in the long run not to the advantage even of those who are sustained on such policies, but basically we have reached the point of compassion fatigue, and we no longer have the energy or the resources or the mindset to take care of these people. Well, I got upset. And I wrote an editorial. And I don't want to read the whole editorial, but I want to read the last part of the editorial, and maybe you'll see why it hadn't gotten printed yet. This editorial that I got upset about because it reflected a sickness in the spirit across the land. Here's what I said. I called it a parable of utter impoverishment. And I saw a great exodus from New York City. All the bridges, tunnels, and piers were jammed with the departing poor. And as they walked or limped along, they pushed their carts of precious little things. And when the poor had all departed, God looked around and saw that they who remained in the city now breathed a sigh of relief. They could enjoy their precious things in peace without the burden of care for the destitute and the poor. Then God, in deep sorrow and tender compassion, began to gather God's precious little things so God could journey with those who had been cast forth from the city. And it came to pass that when God had gathered up the sunlight and the rain, the seed-bearing earth and the life-giving air, God wept over the city and departed, pushing God's own cart of precious little things, and New York City was no more. Well, you can see that I'm worried and disturbed about the spirit of our nation. And what I want to do, since I've already taken 15 minutes to get into this, is to respond to 4 questions which I hope you are asking. I hope you are asking the question, well, what is this sickness? I hope you are asking the question, well, what are the causes of this sickness? I hope some of you are asking, almost with a panic spirit, what will happen if something isn't done about this sickness? At least somebody ought to be asking, well, what can we do about this sickness? If you give me a little time, I'll get right through, and then maybe we can celebrate again. What is this sickness? Because you have been here all week and all are experts at community planning and at theologizing and at social service delivery systems, I can just give you the formula and you can figure it out. See, what is the sickness? I put it this way. It is a sickness of a growing sense of powerlessness. People push buttons and the power is off. You got the point I'm making here. It's a kind of symbol. I mean, you got everything all set up. And yet the power that you have the power you had the last time is not available this time. That's part of what it is. It's a sense of powerlessness, especially when you've been used to having a little power. And then there's the powerlessness that is there when you thought that in just a few days, a few months, or a few years, your power would finally come. That's a sickness. It is also accompanied by paranoia. Almost everybody I know during this era of downsizing seems to feel like, well, it's called paranoia. Everybody is watching over the shoulder to see who's trying to take my job, who's trying to take my place, who's trying to take my benefits, who's trying to take my friendships, who's trying to take my prestige, who's trying to take my security. It's a serious situation, and it is spreading across the nation. Then there is the perplexity. Folks are all mixed up now. There was once a time when you could see a person and you almost knew what language was coming out of the person's mouth. But in this pluralistic age, you don't know what language is going to be spoken when you go to the counters, or when you're on the bus, or when you're in the neighborhood. there is this added perplexity based on the increasing pluralistic nature of America. Well, these conditions are part of the sickness of our time. But I, wanting to be a medical doctor, have almost always tried to find medical metaphors for the disease or the malaise I see in the land. I want you to try out these as an apt description of the sickness in the land. Well, what about Alzheimer's? That part about losing memory. A whole lot of folks are going around telling people, you ought to lift yourself by your own bootstraps, forgetting that when they came on Ellis Island, they didn't even have any boots. People in America have all of us come from somewhere. And Brother Ron, tell the brothers and the sisters out in California as they get ready to develop their anti-alien policies. Tell them we were all aliens and strangers in a land of sojourn. Tell them that we all came here speaking something other than the native tongue. Tell them that. I think a lot of folks have forgotten. It's easy when you've been in power for a little while to forget that such were some of us. It's easy to forget that if somebody had not reached out a hand, we would not have gained the level of success that we have finally achieved. So I'm saying, in America, could the disease be a growing, creeping Alzheimer's with a forgetfulness of the history of how we have come to where we have come? What about if I say maybe what we have in this country is, well, I want to say that from what I know about the immune system, it is that when a body, that's an individual body or the body politic, is healthy, whenever there is a scratch or a cut or a sore or a bruise on the body that's healthy dispatches a mobile emergency unit to the place of assault, organizes, sets up, here's a little light coming back to us, sets up a little emergency room. That's why it swells. That's setting up a tent around the wound so nobody won't bump into it again. And then it begins to cut off the diseased cells and begins to activate extraordinary growth-producing hormones to get it well again, and develops a scar to protect it, sort of like the body's cast around the wound. That's a good, healthy body. It is a body that is characterized by the capacity to go to the place of need and deal with the problematic until healing has been restored. Now I understand that there's a virus which gets into the body, which robs the body of its capacity to deal with the invading or the opportunistic infections, and we call that HIV/AIDS. Well, what about the body politic? If the body politic does not have inner immune resources to go to the place where the cut is, to go where the bruise is, to take care of the elderly, of children, of those who have been disadvantaged and dispossessed, then I know no other thing to say than maybe America has AIDS. Maybe the congresspersons assume that the immune system renders the body incapable of providing the resources necessary for the restoration of health. Or, and I may not know, but thanks for the conversation at the table this afternoon. I understand that really, when you get right down to it, the contract on America seems to have at its heart a response to declining prosperity, the uncertainty whether those who have been in charge of the power will continue to be in charge of it, whether their assets will be in place. It seems very clear that even G7 is no longer capable of organizing the economy of the whole world. They've had to add some other folks like from the Pacific Rim and from other areas, because they now understand that they can no longer completely determine the economic future of the world. Now, in our nation, it seems clear to me that people who have become addicted to things, to material power, to riches and wealth, I think I see, and now that this is on, have I been talking too loud, too loudly? All right, then what I see now is that the powers that be are addicted. The addiction we call greed and power and prestige and control. And let me ask, is it true now that if I were on crack or any other drug and I began to see my source dry up, is it true that I would do anything necessary, not only to get the fix I need now, but to be sure I can get the next one and the next one and the next one? Is that the way it works? Then that explains it. Even millionaires are addicted, and like crack addicts will make national policies that are designed to, I don't care whether it hurts mama on Medicare. I don't care whether it hurts my cousin on Medicaid. I don't care whether it takes milk out of the baby's mouth. I've got to have my next million secure. That's addiction. Is that what is driving the national policy in these days? Let me mention one more. In many of my sermons, I mention this, but the medical personnel usually do not understand when I say the sickness is that there's a spreading epidemic of defective PM glands around the nation. You medical, you don't know about the PM gland. Let me tell you, when the PM gland becomes defective, and I'm saying all over the nation, people are getting it now. And what happens is when you have a defective PM gland, it secretes an energy-inhibiting enzyme, which makes you irritable, which makes you cantankerous and restless and exceedingly aggressive. That's what happens to it. And toxins come, which reduce the capacity of the body to be resilient and flexible. It gives extraordinary rigidity and exceedingly quick reaction time to even the perception of being aggrieved. Don't dish me. And this comes from the defective PM gland. I'm glad I know about this thing. My wife sent me to the store for something, and I rushed to get it, and while I got to the store, there was no parking place, but I saw that a man at the counter was coming out, so I waited until he came out. And then after he came out and drove away, I proceeded to drive into the parking space. Somebody whirled around me and got into the parking space. I said, hey, that's my space. I honked on my horn. I've been waiting here for 2 minutes. And then I got out of my car and walked over and began to tell that man, you stole my space. But I looked at his eyes, and from my visual inspection, as he had hostility in his eyes, I detected that he was one of the persons with one of these defective PM glands. And I thought it would be an awful shame for the New York Times to print the next day, Riverside pastor slain, arguing over a parking space. You can't mess with these people these days. These people will get you. There are militias in every state now with this defective PM gland. Oh yes, the PM gland is the purpose and meaning gland.
When the purpose and meaning gland is defective, people act funny. They become violent. They become hateful. They become ruthless. That's what happens when there is this defective PM gland. Well, you can see I wanted to be a doctor, but I only got as far as undergraduate, so I better move on to philosophy. What are the causes? What are the causes of these conditions which require healing? Let me do this more quickly. I get carried away on diagnosis like most of us preachers. We are good at diagnosis and run out of time before we get to prescription. So I have already suggested what might be the root causes. I've said there is a disorienting change, that people have this loss of power because things are disoriented and they can't be sure. I have a feeling that whatever it is that requires equilibrium in the body, that the equilibrium is being upset in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways in which the equilibrium has been set is indicated in the kinds of reports and studies and polls which come out that reveal that the distance between the haves and the have-nots is growing. You can imagine why people stagger. When a body has 40% of its mass located in 1% of its body, you can understand why it gets top-heavy and can hardly stand up. That's what's happening in our society. 1% of the people with 40% of the wealth. Why, it's amazing that we are able to walk at all as a nation with that kind of disproportion. I think that's it too. And then, as I've mentioned about memory, I think that I have done some research, and I have finally come to the conclusion that one of the problems in the world, and please, I'm glad we have a lectern. And Marion, I've always been given to propriety in my preaching, but I'm going to border on the inappropriate right now. I'm going to tell you that I have found out in my research that the problem is that with the increase in selfishness, people for themselves and themselves alone, that I've been doing research, and I have found that there are a lot of Americans who do not have a belly button. Because clearly, if they had a belly button, they would know that they did not give birth to themselves. If they had, I want to ask everybody out, do you all have a belly button? Don't check it out now. You don't have a pulpit. But what I'm trying to say to you is that selfishness, when you get right down to it, I made myself. I'm going to take care of myself. I have no obligation, no responsibility to anybody else than myself. I'm my own grandpa. I'm my own mama. I'm my own daddy. And here is where my responsibility ends. I've done this research. I want to tell you, I've even asked for permission to go to the Congress and to see if by some kind of scanning method I could find out whether the senators and the representatives, and I'm going to go over to the Supreme Court, and I'm going to check a few belly buttons out up under those robes to see whether they understand that nobody ever makes it without affirmative action. Somebody had to grunt to bring you here. Somebody had to struggle to get you here. How do you think you made it by yourself? Well, is that enough for the second question? What are the causes? And what will happen if something isn't done? I tell you, if we don't do something about this spirit of sickness in our land, I'm afraid we're all going to be in trouble. You see, when this kind of sickness takes place, a kind of natural reaction formation is defensiveness in the form of scapegoating. And we haven't seen anything yet. As a kid, I knew that I was scapegoated because I was left-handed. And I always thought they were against left-handed folks. They wouldn't even want me on the team because all the baseball mitts were for right-handers. Do you ever understand? Had you ever figured out that in a poor community they didn't have right-handed mitts and left? Do they make left-handed mitts? Right-handed, I mean, for both sides now? Thank God we've come into a more enlightened age. When I came around, I had to catch the ball with my left hand, take the glove off, and then throw it with my left hand. You understand? That's a deprivation. Left-handers have been scapegoated. Women have been scapegoated. Gays have been scapegoated. People down south with a southern accent have been scapegoated. People with the wrong kind of hair or the wrong braiding of the hair have been scapegoated. People of certain ideologies are scapegoated. You never know who's going to be scapegoated next. This disease, as long as it's rampant, will find first one group and another having been cast into the scapegoating role. And usually there is a demonization of persons. And the process of the demonization of persons is to get ready to have a justification for the extermination of persons. Oh, I know that was what was going on with Rodney King, and the poor fella can't seem to get himself together. Hey, brother, can't you get him in a program or something? Try to help him out. I don't know. I mean, they beat the brother up so bad until even the cops probably feel bad when they arrest him. But the point is, extermination is the thing. And what those cops were doing, they were giving us a preview of what will happen more broadly. Police brutality in many, many areas. Death penalty on the rise. Why? Because the scapegoat, in order to fulfill its function, has to die. The scapegoat that escapes it won't achieve the purpose of purifying the earth. And Rodney King's major problem was the boy wouldn't die. The man wouldn't die. They kept beating him and beating him. Kind of like, I know what it's like. Have you ever had a nightmare where something was after you and you got a stick and you hit it and you hit it and you hit it, and the more you hit it, the more it rose up? That's a nightmare. Yes, it is possible that if something isn't done about this disease, this virus, that we're going to discover brutality like we've never known it before, even in the good old US of A. Oh, let me cut this point short. That we have a warfare against selected population targets like in the movie. What's the movie? Outbreak. How many have seen Outbreak? You saw Outbreak. Y'all all ought to see Outbreak, because that tells the story that when this virus used to be spread by contact, had a mutation so that it no longer required contact, but it was airborne, then what happens is this thing could spread all over, and they thought they'd be dead in 48 hours if something weren't done. The whole nation would be infected. They were getting ready to drop a bomb to completely obliterate the location that was supposed to be the epicenter of the outbreak of this condition. I think that is what will happen. It will happen first spiritually, emotionally, a social philosophy. Some kind of bell curve will be brought to bear to justify what gets ready to happen. And in the course of time, more outright methodologies will be used to ward off the invading microbe as it manifests itself in the demonized portion of the population. Well, that's the third point. And now for the fourth and final point. You would hope there would be some good news in this sermon, wouldn't you? You are the good news of the sermon. If the analysis has not been too depressing, then you are a part of the solution. Brothers and sisters, please don't just sit around and complain. And I know how difficult that is. The reason I know how difficult it is because I once got tired of giving up Haagen-Dazs ice cream for Lent. And I decided to take up something really serious. One Easter, one Lenten season, I gave up complaining for Lent. That was the hardest Lent I ever had. I was so glad when Easter came so I could go back to complaining again. I tell you, complaining is something we enjoy doing. Well, I want you to know that it is not enough to sit around and complain. We have to do something. Brothers and sisters, it's time to join the Do Something Club. Tinley Temple, let me go back to Philadelphia. At Tinley Temple, when they went through the roughest period of their development, the pastor had done all that he could do. And then they decided, a group of women got together, said, we're going to do something. They decided to raise some money, institute some programs, and then somebody said, well, what are we going to call ourselves? They said, we're going to call ourselves the Do Something Club. That's what this retreat is all about. That's what this training session is, to spread all across the land. Do something clubs to make sure that complaint will not be our last resort. Well, I think another thing to do is to do what Reverend Ike said some years ago. Now, I do not have him as a patron saint, and Reverend Ike is not my role model. In fact, I disliked what he said. They asked him on the radio, Reverend Ike, what is your solution to the poverty problem? He says, well, the best way to help the poor is not to be one of them. That was Reverend Ike's philosophy. But in terms of the healing in America, why not let us resolve that we are going to be made whole ourselves? That's a good start, isn't it? To invest in becoming whole, mind, body, spirit, politically, economically, spiritually, mentally. Why not let's commit ourselves? Lord, I want to be whole. That's the question that Jesus asked that man that day. Do you want to be made whole? Yes, I want to be made whole. I am tired of living a fragmented life. I'm tired of having myself out of kilter. I'm tired of my PM gland being all messed up. I am tired of being addicted and under control by something that does not enrich my life. We could help if we decide I'm going to be whole. I'm going to get well. I'm going to offer myself as an exhibit A of what God's healing power can do, of what the community's power can perform. That's one thing to do. But then after you make up your mind that you are going to be whole, why not join with my leader, my idol, Jesus the Christ? And this is what he did, and with these words I close. Jesus met this man who had been sick a very long time. And Jesus saw him, and there were a whole lot of sick folks. Brothers and sisters, there are a whole lot of sick folk in this land of ours. They are black and they are white, they are Asian, they are Hispanics, they are rich, they are poor, they are young, and they are old. But Jesus focused in on this one. The CDF always focuses in on the young one. The young one, if we can give them that healthy start, that head start, that fair start, if we can get them started with a moral start, we believe we can heal this nation. That's why we have gathered here. And what I think Jesus did is what I think we must do. Jesus looked at that man who had been sick for 38 years and asked him, did he want to be well? And what I noticed is, on the surface, the man's answer was no, because of the following excuses. I think we are in an age of victimization, where people sit around and can't figure out whether they really want to be well because they have absorbed this interminable sense of I'm a victim. And there are all sorts of victims now. Everybody has gotten on the gravy train of victimization. In fact, the last is white male Protestants now.
They're on the victim train as well. We're the ones who are having all our rights taken away from us. Everybody is on a victim trail. But Jesus looked beyond that surface response and saw deep in that man that man wanted to be made whole. There is a place in every human being where there is at least a faint recollection of what it might feel like to be whole. And our job is to commit ourselves to finding that space and ministering with a helping, healing hand. And I think that's the way we're going to begin to heal this land. However, you should know as you get ready to go that your work is not just one-on-one. It begins with one. But in this story, notice, this man was able to get up, but it's going to require some protest. This CDF work is usually wonderful work, but now that we are under assault for the programs that we have been producing through the years, it takes a little protest. I never knew Jesus was a protest leader until I read this text when Jesus said to the man, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." He was encouraging civil disobedience. Everybody knew you didn't walk with a bed on the Sabbath day. Everybody knew that was against the law. But Jesus told the man, we got to start a protest here. And the man picked up his bed and walked. And the story says, later on Jesus found the man and said to him, "Now you are well, but don't sin again lest the worst thing happen to you." Revealing that Jesus knew that it was not that man's physiological problem that was the real problem. That man had a sick spirit. He had bought into the victimization scenario in a sick system. And this was the work that Jesus came to do, to take individuals one by one, liberate them from addiction to the beggarly elements of the system, and give them a sense of wholeness. And in the light of that, Jesus was able to go forth and to become the healer who invites us all to this healing ministry. Marion, can I tell one last story that I tell all the time? Can I tell one last one? You have come from different communities, and you bring different gifts, and you will have different styles, and you will have different approaches, and you will have different networks. But the Holy Spirit is gathering us together, even with the multiplicity of our gifts and approaches, because the problem is highly differentiated into all sorts of places and is spread everywhere. But that when the Spirit can get us together with a focus on what we want to do, then God will be able to bring us together like happened on that Sunday afternoon. This is my Sister Baldwin's story. Sister Baldwin called the church while we were having afternoon service and said she was sick, please come. We went to her house, and the following members joined me to go to her house. Her nose was bleeding so bad that when we got there, blood was all over the place. We set about our work with our different approaches and our different styles. The first person was Brother Midget, who took a medicine bottle and caught 3 drops of blood from Sister Baldwin's nose and closed it up and put it on a cupboard, saying this is what grandmother used to do when we kids had nose bleedings. Then Sister Coleman got a brown paper sack and tore off a piece of paper, rolled it up, and stuck it under Sister Baldwin's lip. Then Sister Randolph, a practical nurse, got some ice out of the refrigerator and made an ice pack and applied the ice pack. And I, the charismatic pastor, put my hands upon Sister Baldwin, and I prayed to God that God would heal her. And you may not believe it, but in about a minute, Sister Baldwin's nose stopped bleeding. We went back to our church rejoicing. Our only problem was we didn't know which method had worked. And I think that's what we are about here. We've come from different parts of the nation. We have our different methodologies, our different credentials. But God is saying, if I could get you all together, mobilizing, strategizing, training, and then being energized, then the healing will take place and God will have blessed America, and we will be able to teach South Africa and Bosnia and Ireland and Rwanda and places around the world how to be a healthy nation.